Hi, Aditi. Tonight we're reading the last chapter of the tale of Little Pig Robinson by Beatrix Potter, and it comes from the book The Complete Tales. And we're going to start with chapter 8, the last chapter. Robinson rowed away from the pound of candles. He tugged steadily at the oars. They were heavy for him. The sun had set, but I understand that in the tropics, I've never been there is a phosphorescent light upon the sea. When Robinson lifted his oars, the sparkling water dripped from the blades like diamonds, and presently the moon began to rise above the horizon, rising like half a great silver plate. Robinson rested on his oars and gazed at the ship, motionless in the moonlight, on a sea without a ripple. It was at this moment, he being a quarter of a mile away, that the two sailors came on deck and thought that his boat was a swimming beetle. Robinson was too far away to see or hear the uproar on board the Pound of Candles, but he did presently perceive that 3 boats were starting in pursuit. Involuntarily, he commenced to squeal and rowed frantically, but before he had time to exhaust himself by racing, the ship's boats turned back. Then Robinson remembered the cat's work with the gimlet, and he knew that the boats were leaking. For the rest of the night he rowed quietly, without haste. He was not inclined to sleep, and the air was pleasantly cool. Next day it was hot, but Robinson slept soundly under the sailcloth, which the cat had been careful to send with him, in case he wished to rig up a tent. The ship receded from view, and you know the sea is not really flat. First he could not see the hull, then he could not see the deck, then only part of the masts, then nothing at all. Robinson had been steering his course by the ship. Having lost sight of this direction sign, he turned round to consult his compass when, bump, bump, the boat touched a sandbank. Fortunately, it did not stick. Robinson stood up in the boat, working one oar backwards and gazing round. What should he see but the top of the bong tree? Half an hour's rowing brought him to the beach of a large and fertile island. He landed in the most approved manner in a convenient sheltered bay, where a stream of boiling water flowed down the silvery strand. The shore was covered with oysters. Acid drops and sweets grew upon the trees. Yams, which are a sort of sweet potato, abounded, ready cooked. The breadfruit tree grew iced cakes and muffins ready baked, so no pig need sigh for porridge. Overhead towered the bong tree. If you want a more detailed description of the island, you might read Robinson Crusoe. The island of the bong tree was very like Crusoe's, only without its drawbacks. I have never been there myself, so I rely upon the report of the Owl and the Pussycat, who visited it 18 months later and spent a delightful honeymoon there. They spoke enthusiastically about the climate, only it was a little too warm for the owl. Later on, Robinson was visited by Stumpy and little dog Tipkins. They found him perfectly contented and in the best of good health. He was not at all inclined to return to Steinmouth. For anything I know, he may be living there still upon the island. He grew fatter and more fatterer, and the ship's cook never found him. The end. Now, a lot of this story was written as though it had been written before a famous poem of that time that had already been written and was popular when Beatrix Potter was alive. And it was written by Edward Lear, and it was called The Owl and the Pussycat. And it was written in the 1800s when Edward Lear lived. You might want to someday look him up. He was an interesting character. He was the youngest of 21 children. Can you imagine having 20 older brothers and sisters? And at a point in his life, he started writing sort of nonsense books, nonsense poetry, basing them off of limericks. So one of the ones he was famous for was The Owl and the Pussycat, and I'm going to read it to you because Beatrix, part of her story is based on this. So, the owl and the pussycat went to sea in a beautiful pea-green boat. They took some honey and plenty of money wrapped up in a 5-pound note. The owl looked up to the stars above and sang to a small guitar. Oh, lovely pussy, oh, pussy, my love, what a beautiful pussy you are. You are, what a beautiful pussy you are. Pussy said to the owl, you elegant fowl, how charmingly sweet you sing. Oh, let us be married, too long we have tarried, but what shall we do for a ring? They sailed away for a year and a day to the land where the bong tree grows, and there in a wood a piggy wig stood with a ring at the end of his nose, with a ring at the end of his nose. Dear pig, are you willing to sell for 1 shilling your ring? Said the piggy. I will. So they took it away and were married next day by the turkey who lives on the hill. They dined on mince and slices of quince, which they ate with a runcible spoon, and hand in hand on the edge of the sand, they danced by the light of the moon. The moon, they danced by the light of the moon. Good night, Aditi. Sweet dreams. I love you.